So lots to get to with Major Garrett now joins me from the White House, rather. And Major, again, we saw the tweet this morning. It previews a week ahead that the president said will focus on jobs and national security issues. What more can you tell us about the president's agenda in his first full week here in office?
Well, let's focus on today. At 10:30, we expect executive orders to be signed by President Trump, among them formally withdrawing the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was a multinational trade deal with a lot of nations in Asia. It was a big part of the campaign conversation. It was already dead as a legislative matter. That agreement, that text, never even got a vote in the Congress the last Congress. It wasn't going to get a vote in this new Congress, but there'll be an executive order withdrawing the United States from that entire process. That's one of the executive orders we're expecting. Also, probably something related to a lobbying ban for anyone serving in this White House for 5 years after you leave. Maybe a freeze on federal hiring, some things dealing with environment, immigration. If all those don't come today, I expect them to come this week. That's a big part of this president's agenda, executive orders that forward campaign promises made dealing with the economy, trade, or regulations. All of those things this White House wants to accomplish in the first week to at least send a signal. The things said during the campaign, to the degree they can be implemented or altered from their existing state via executive order, that will be done rapidly. And then whatever can't be done there will be done legislatively. And that agenda will be at least put in motion slightly tonight when the president meets with all of the leaders, Republican and Democrat, from the House and Senate. That's about 5 o'clock tonight here at the White House.
Let's turn then to the weekend that was for the new Trump administration, beginning with the response that we saw to the marches on Saturday that broke out across the country and really the globe. First, we saw that Donald Trump wondered essentially on Twitter, in part, why these people didn't vote. About an hour and a half later, however, we saw another tweet speaking to his assurance that protests are a hallmark of our democracy. What to make of two tweets that seem to have been almost written by two different people?
Well, that's part of the evolving message from this White House. It's realizing that this is no longer a campaign, and what the president says echoes all around the world in whatever form it is said, whether the president says it on Twitter, if he says it himself, or his press secretary says it on his behalf. And there are real-world consequences and real-world political reactions to things that are said by the president in a way that they were said during the campaign, except the ramifications are so much larger once you're in this office. And that evolution is a reflection of that understanding. And look, let's just be honest, Josh. It doesn't really take much for a president to say, I respect the right of people to protest in the streets. That's a fundamental American value. That isn't necessarily or shouldn't be any kind of revelation or breaking news. That's a fundamental part of what our process in this country is about. For every political action, there is usually a reaction. And we saw action on Friday, where the president, with his inaugural address, said, I'm handing power back to the people. And some of the people who heard that took to the streets on Saturday. That was their reaction. This conversation is going to continue. This White House is dead center in the middle of it, and it's realizing that everything it says about evaluations of this presidency echo far and wide. And they are probably working on the process of recalibrating those things they say, how frequently they say them, and the passion with which they present them.
Well, then it seemed that's really what we watched perhaps in real time, almost a workshopping of this idea on Saturday afternoon. We saw the president make those remarks in front of the memorial wall at the CIA, touches on everything from inauguration, crowd size, his misgivings with the press. He blamed the war of words between the president and the intelligence community on the press. He talked about how many times he'd appeared on the cover of Time magazine. How are lawmakers on Capitol Hill reacting?
Well, that this does not represent the proper focus of an incoming presidency. There are lots of things to worry about, lots of things to devote your attention to, and lots of things to use your bully pulpit of the presidency to move forward on behalf of your agenda. Arguing about fictitious misreporting of the crowd sizes at the inauguration is probably not the best use of a president's time or rhetoric. That's the reaction I've gotten from a lot of political figures here in Washington. And their sense is, if this president wants to devote his time and energy to triviality like that, where the things he says on his behalf can be easily proven to be wrong, as it was true on Saturday. I mean, the crowd wasn't as large as he said it was. Anyone could see that. Many politicians I've spoken to said that's not the best use of your time. More importantly, it's not the best use of the rhetoric you're using as president, because that rhetoric needs to persuade, move the country forward, and tell your supporters you're on the ball. All these things are quite clearly a work in progress.
And again, as we've Press Secretary Sean Spicer step to the podium, deliver rather incendiary remarks, take no questions, remarks that were verifiably untrue. As somebody, especially like yourself, who depends on a press secretary for information regarding the president, what do you think the response was after he delivered those remarks in the White House, and what do you expect to hear from him today?
I have no idea what to expect to hear from him today, and I will always take whatever any president of the United States says seriously, because that is a serious statement, because by definition it comes from a serious person, the President of the United States. I'm not going to spend any time talking about something that the press secretary said on behalf of the president that's provably false.
Major Garrett at the White House, we do, as always, appreciate the insight.